Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We've had these Elton John tickets for months." My mother's voice screamed through the hospital video call, echoing off the sterile walls. It was Christmas Eve. I was in a hospital bed, fighting through the pain of internal bleeding, clutching my phone in disbelief. Across the room, my 2-year-old twins, Ethan and Emily, played quietly while a nurse checked my vitals. I had asked my parents to care for my children during my emergency surgery. Their response? Concert tickets were more important. The betrayal cut deeper than any scalpel could. My body was in crisis, but the real pain came from realizing my parents didn't care if I lived or died. Have your parents ever let you down when it mattered most? My name is Natasha Wilson. I'm 33, a widow, a mother of twins, and until that night, I was still clinging to the hope that my parents loved me. I was never the favorite. That title belonged to my younger sister Jessica from the moment she was born. Where I was expected to be quiet, responsible, and self-sufficient, Jessica was the center of every celebration, the star in every story. When she landed a role in a local commercial at 14, my parents framed the newspaper clipping and displayed it in the hallway for years. When I graduated college with honors, they sent a quick congrats text because Jessica had a piano recital that weekend and needed all the attention. My wedding to James was too far from their home, so they showed up late and left early. When the twins were born, they visited once, stayed 20 minutes, and complained that Ethan cried too much. Still, I kept trying. I kept believing that if I was just a little more helpful, a little more successful, they'd finally see me. After my parents took early retirement 3 years ago, I began sending them $2,500, 0 cents each month, to help with their mortgage and living expenses. I didn't have much to spare, but I told myself it was the right thing to do. I had a good job as a freelance graphic designer, and James was working in real estate he would manage, even as prices rose and the twins needed more. I sent the money faithfully, month after month, even after James died. James. My heart still aches when I think about him. He was calm where I was anxious, steady when the world spun out of control. He'd grown up with parents even colder than mine, so he understood me in a way no one else did. "We'll build our own family," he used to say. "One that knows how to love." And we did. Our little apartment wasn't big, but it was warm. There were bedtime stories, pancakes on Sundays, tiny handprints on the fridge. It was our world. Then, one rainy night, everything changed. A drunk driver ran a red light. James never made it home. Suddenly, I was a widow at 33, the sole parent of 2 toddlers, trying to hold everything together with duct tape and willpower. I kept working, barely sleeping, crying in the shower while the twins napped. And still, I kept sending the $2,500, 0 cents to my parents. Not because they asked. Jessica lived in another city and called occasionally, usually to talk about her life. I never blamed her. She didn't understand the weight I carried because she had always been protected from it. Our parents made sure she stayed in the sunshine while I lived in the shadow of responsibility. When I asked them for help during my health crisis, it was the first time I had ever begged them for anything. And they still said no. They didn't even hesitate. For them, my emergency was an inconvenience. Their concert and Christmas plans came first. That was when everything inside me began to shift. Years of guilt, pain, and disappointment boiled into something new: resolve. I realized that love shouldn't require this kind of sacrifice, and that maybe, just maybe, I deserved better. When the abdominal pain first started, I thought it was stress. I hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks, and caring for twin toddlers alone was exhausting, but the pain sharpened quickly, wrapping around my side like a vice. A trip to the doctor revealed internal bleeding, likely from complications following James's death. Not optional, not when it's convenient. Now, the first thing I thought of wasn't the pain, it was Ethan and Emily. I didn't have anyone else. James's family had been estranged for years. Most of my friends had their own families to deal with, so I called my parents. I thought surely this would be the moment they'd come through. They were my children's grandparents. My mother answered with her usual clipped tone. I explained the situation calmly. I needed surgery. The twins needed someone to watch them. Could they come for just 2 or 3 days? She sighed. Natasha, we already have plans. Jessica's flying in and we've got tickets to the Elton John Christmas show. We've been looking forward to this for months. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Mom, I could die. I need help. My father chimed in from the background. We're retired now. We've earned our time. You're always calling with some problem. Their words felt like ice in my veins. I pleaded, just for a few days, just until I got through the surgery. Please, I have no one else. Just stay with them while I'm in the hospital. That's when my mother snapped. Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. This is our time now. We deserve to enjoy our lives without constantly cleaning up your messes. My breath caught. My messes? I'd been financially supporting them for years. I was the one working non-stop while grieving, and now I was being scolded for needing surgery. The call ended with them refusing. Not even a hint of apology. Just complaints about their schedule and how I was being inconsiderate. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, trying not to cry in front of the twins. Emily was feeding her stuffed bunny crackers. Ethan was lining up toy cars. They didn't know Mommy might be going under anesthesia. They didn't understand the weight pressing down on my chest. That's when Valerie, my nurse, gently touched my shoulder. I heard everything, she said softly. You shouldn't have to go through this alone. She offered to call her friend Olivia, a nanny who had experience with trauma care. I nodded, through tears. It was in that moment, watching my innocent children, feeling Valerie's quiet kindness, and replaying my parents' cruelty, that something inside me cracked open. Not in a breaking way, in a freeing way. I realized the truth I had spent my life avoiding. I could no longer trust my parents. I had to stop asking them to be someone they would never be. And I had to protect my children. From them. Valerie moved quickly. My friend Avilia used to work at the children's hospital, she said gently. She specializes in childhood trauma and now works as a private nanny. She's great with kids, and she's local. Do you want me to call her? I nodded, too tired to speak. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, but under it was something harder to swallow. Lying there in that hospital bed, waiting for someone else to save the day, I began to understand something I had never let myself fully accept. My parents had always failed me. Not just today, not just this once. Always. When I graduated from college with honors, they left early to beat traffic to Jessica's audition. When I got married, they complained that the venue was too far. When the twins were born, they visited once and said they were too noisy. This wasn't new. I just couldn't ignore it anymore. Within the hour, Olivia arrived. She had soft eyes and a steady presence that immediately calmed Ethan and Emily. She knelt beside them, offering crayons and gently asking about their favorite books. Within minutes, Emily was showing her a tattered stuffed giraffe, and Ethan handed over his toy truck without hesitation. I knew in my gut they were good hands. I turned to Valerie. Can you bring me my phone? She placed it in my hand, and I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, with trembling fingers, I opened my banking app. The $2,500 0 cents transfer was scheduled to go through next week. I canceled it. I removed the recurring payment altogether. It felt surreal, like I was taking back a piece of myself that I hadn't realized was missing. Next, I opened my messages and typed out the words I had never had the courage to send. I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Do not contact me again. I hit send. The message flew into the void, and I waited for the panic to set in, the guilt, the second guessing. But it didn't come. Instead, there was a strange, quiet peace that settled over me like a blanket. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. I had chosen my children. Not out of spite, not to punish, but because it was the right thing to do. Valerie returned with the surgical team. It's time, she said softly. As they wheeled me down the hallway toward the operating room, The fluorescent lights above flickered past like stars. The pain in my abdomen was intense, but it wasn't the only thing I felt. There were tears in my eyes, but they weren't just from fear. I was scared, yes. I didn't know if I'd wake up. But I also felt something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. When I woke up, the lights were dim, and the world felt muffled. The pain was sharp, but manageable. Surgery had gone well. Valerie stood nearby, giving me a soft smile, while Olivia sat by the window reading to the twins. They were safe. I had made it. My phone buzzed on the tray beside me, blinking with notifications. I picked it up, and the screen lit up with missed calls, 27 in total. Dozens of messages from my parents. Jessica waited to be opened. I scrolled through the texts, my hands still weak from anesthesia. It started with confusion. Then why haven't you responded? Did you cancel the transfer by mistake? Then anger. We can't believe you'd do this to us. This is outrageous, Natasha. You're being cruel. And finally, desperation. We're counting on that money. The mortgage is due. You need to fix this, now. Not a single question about how the surgery had gone. Not one word asking if I was alive, or if the twins were okay. It was all about the money. Jessica's messages were different. Mom and Dad said you were having a routine checkup. What's going on? They're panicking about money. Why didn't you tell me? I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. It wasn't a routine checkup. It was emergency surgery. Internal bleeding. I needed someone to watch the twins, and they refused. They said their concert was more important. So I cut them off. There was silence for a while. Then a reply. Oh my God, Natasha, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I would have come. I would have helped. I believed her. Jessica had always been the golden child, but not malicious. She had just been protected, shielded from the truth, while I carried the burden of our parents' emotional neglect. Maybe now she would begin to see it too. Later that day, Valerie helped me sit up and eat. Olivia brought the twins in for a short visit. Watching Ethan climb onto my bed and Emily snuggle beside me filled my heart with gratitude. They were the reason I had to stay strong. The reason I could no longer allow toxic people to hover at the edges of our lives. That night, I made a decision. I contacted a lawyer and began drafting a new will. I named Olivia as a temporary guardian for the twins in case anything ever happened to me. I wanted someone kind and stable to protect them, not people who had chosen Elton John tickets over their lives. Then I opened my contacts and blocked my parents' numbers. I didn't write another message. I didn't justify myself. I simply ended the conversation. I left Jessica's number unblocked but muted, choosing to give her space while I watched how she handled the truth. I had no illusions. Cutting ties with my parents would stir chaos, but I no longer cared. Their betrayal had gone public, not just to Jessica, but to anyone paying attention. And while they scrambled to rewrite the narrative, I had finally written a new one of my own. One where I protected my children. One where I protected myself. The days after surgery were hard. My body was weak, and every movement sent aches through my abdomen. But thanks to Olivia, I could focus on healing. She came every morning with a warm smile, settling the twins into a routine that gave them stability while I rested. She read them books, sang lullabies, and played games on the floor of my hospital room as if she had known them their whole lives. When I was discharged, 5 days later, I returned to an apartment that felt completely different. Not because anything had changed physically, but because the emotional weight had started to lift. I wasn't alone anymore. I had made the hardest decision of my life, and I was standing by it. Then, just 2 days into my recovery, it happened. My father sent an email to our entire extended family. The subject line read, "Urgent, our daughter's abandonment." The message was drenched in guilt-tripping language and half-truths. He claimed I had cut them off without warning, that they had sacrificed everything to support me, and that my sudden cruelty had put them at risk of losing their home. He mentioned nothing about my surgery, nothing about the twins, just money and their fear of losing it. He wanted the family to turn against me, to shame me back into compliance. Instead, something else happened. Before I even had a chance to respond, my cousin Michael replied to the thread. "Didn't you guys just buy a boat last year?" Then, another message from a second cousin. "And that diamond bracelet you showed off at Thanksgiving? Was that before or after the supposed financial hardship?" Private messages poured in, some from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. They asked for my side of the story. I responded with one brief, factual email to the same thread. I recently underwent emergency surgery due to internal bleeding. My parents refused to help care for my children, choosing to attend a concert instead. I've decided to prioritize my recovery and the well-being of my kids. That's the full story. That was it. And it was enough. Family support flooded in, from text messages, calls, even home-cooked meals dropped off by local relatives I barely knew. One of my cousins offered to babysit part-time, free of charge. Jessica, already shaken by the truth, showed up at my apartment with groceries and spent the afternoon playing with the twins. She wasn't pretending anymore. We sat down while the kids napped, and she opened up. "They always made it sound like you were just dramatic, that you didn't want to be close. I never realized they were pushing you away." I nodded. They've been lying for years. To both of us. The next week, she visited our parents and helped them go over their finances. What she discovered was shocking. They had taken a second mortgage on their house to buy that boat. They'd also invested in a sketchy startup recommended by one of Dad's golf buddies and lost most of their retirement savings. "They were counting on your money indefinitely," Jessica said. "They didn't just overspend. They built their entire lifestyle assuming you'd always fund it." Her words should have made me angry, but mostly, I felt validated. As my strength returned, so did my sense of self. I started taking on graphic design projects again, small jobs at first, just enough to feel productive. Then I had an idea. James had always admired how I designed his memorial page after the funeral. It had brought comfort to others who knew him, so I built a second site for another widow in my support group, then another. Word spread. Soon I had my first paying client for a custom memorial website. For the first time in months, I felt inspired. Meanwhile, my parents' messages grew more frantic. My mother left voicemails crying. My father sent spreadsheets detailing their debts. They even showed up once, only to be turned away at the door. But their desperation didn't touch me anymore. I had made my choice, and each day, with Olivia's help, with Jessica's growing support, and with my new work taking root, I was building something stronger than anything they could destroy. I was rebuilding me. 3 weeks into my recovery, the knock on the door was sharp and unrelenting. I knew who it was before I even looked. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing there, my mother clutching her designer handbag, my father stiff and silent with arms crossed like a disappointed principal. I opened the door just enough to speak. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. My mother's face lit up with fake concern. "Natasha, darling, we've been so worried. You haven't answered our calls, and we needed to make sure you and the twins were all right." "We're fine," I replied, not inviting them inside. "Now, if that's all." "It's not," my father cut in, his tone shifting instantly to business. "We need to talk about the financial situation. The bank called about the mortgage, and we had to dip into our cruise savings to cover this month's payment." I blinked. Not a single word about the surgery, not a single question about the twins. Just money. "I told you I was cutting off support," I said, "and I meant it." "Sweetie," my mother pleaded, her voice rising, "we've come to depend on that money. Your father and I adjusted our lifestyle based on your commitment." "My commitment?" I echoed, incredulous. "You mean the thousands I sent every month while grieving, parenting alone, and now recovering from surgery? You call that a commitment? Like, I signed a contract?" My father's face darkened. "That's not fair, Natasha. We had plans. We thought you'd come around. This tantrum has gone on long enough." Just then, Emily wandered into the hallway, rubbing her eyes and holding her stuffed giraffe. She looked up at the unfamiliar voices, and then back at me. My mother crouched down and opened her arms. "There's my precious grandbaby," she cooed. Emily blinked, then backed away and grabbed the hem of my shirt. My mother's smile faltered. "She doesn't know you," I said simply. "You've seen her, 3 times in her life? You chose not to be involved." "We had busy lives," my father snapped, "and now you're punishing us for it." "This isn't punishment. This is consequence," I said calmly. "You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." I closed the door. The next day, they returned, but not alone. This time, Aunt Patty was with them, our family's self-appointed peacemaker. She called through the door, trying her best gentle tone. "Natasha, honey, let's be reasonable. Your parents are struggling without your help." "They managed for decades before I started helping them," I replied, without opening the door. "They chose early retirement knowing they couldn't afford it." My mother chimed in, her voice breaking for effect. "We made those choices because you promised to help us." "I never promised to support you forever. I offered help temporarily. That's not the same." They left eventually, but the fallout wasn't over. A few days later, my father sent another mass email to our extended family. It was a dramatic retelling of how I had abandoned them after everything they'd sacrificed for me. They painted me as cold, ungrateful, and vindictive. But their plan backfired. My cousin Michael replied immediately. "Didn't you just buy a boat last year? And Aunt Diana's bracelet? Struggling, huh?" Then came more replies, many supportive, others curious. Several relatives reached out privately, asking for the full story. I sent them the facts: emergency surgery, refusal to help, and the financial cutoff. Support poured in again. Even Aunt Patty called to apologize. "I had no idea it was that serious. They told me you were just having a routine procedure and using it to manipulate them." By the end of the week, their story had unraveled. Everyone saw them for what they were: entitled, manipulative, and careless. I finally saw it too, with perfect clarity. I owed them nothing. 4 months after the surgery, life began to feel livable again. Not perfect, not painless, but stable. My side business, Mark Designing Memorial Websites, had taken off more than I ever expected. What started as a tribute to James had become a way to honor others, and word had spread through my support group. Orders trickled in from fellow widows and grieving families, each one helping me pay bills, build savings, and slowly reclaim purpose. With Olivia's help, and some financial breathing room now that I wasn't supporting my parents, I sold our tiny apartment. It had been filled with memories of James, but also shadows of survival. With Diana's help, I found a small 3-bedroom home in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood. It had a fenced backyard where Ethan and Emily could chase butterflies and kick soccer balls. It felt like a fresh start. Olivia stayed on as a part-time nanny, 3 days a week. She had become more than help. She was family. Jessica, too, had changed. She visited regularly, brought meals, played with the twins. I had learned to stop waiting for validation. I stopped framing myself as just a widow or just a mom. I was a businesswoman, a survivor, and someone who had finally set boundaries and honored them. I felt taller, not physically, but emotionally. I wasn't weighed down by obligation anymore. Then, one crisp Saturday morning, there was another knock on the door. I opened it to find my parents standing there, holding a thick folder of papers. My mother looked worn down, My father had aged 10 years in 4 months. "We need to talk," he said. "We're about to lose everything." I let them inside, not because I felt guilty, but because I was curious. They sat at the kitchen table while I stood by the counter, arms folded. They laid out a spreadsheet of debt, missed mortgage payments, credit card bills, a second mortgage used to buy that boat I never set foot on. "We need $144,000, 0 cents to get current," my father said, his voice almost breaking. "The bank has given us 60 days. My mother's voice was brittle. "We've sold the boat. We've canceled our cruise. We've done everything we can. Natasha." "You haven't," I replied evenly. "You haven't taken responsibility for the choices you made when you thought I'd keep paying forever." "We lost everything," my mother whispered. I stared at them, thinking of James, of what we lost, of the nights I cried in silence while paying their mortgage. "I lost my husband," I said, quietly but firmly. "My children lost their father, and we survived. So will you." They blinked, stunned by the finality in my tone. I opened the door. "Good luck," I said simply. And that was it. I didn't look back as they walked down the steps. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was free. Nearly a year after my surgery, a handwritten letter arrived in my mailbox. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. It was from my mother. Inside, her handwriting was shaky but clear. She apologized, not with excuses, but with genuine self-reflection. She admitted to being jealous of my independence, to failing me when I needed her most, and to recognizing that love doesn't mean control. She said they had started therapy. Jessica later confirmed it, even adding that my father had taken a part-time job at a hardware store to help cover expenses. I didn't respond right away. I needed time. But eventually, I agreed to meet them at a quiet cafe. When they walked in, I hardly recognized them. Gone were the designer clothes and entitled postures. They looked real, tired, but softer. We sat. We talked. They listened without interrupting, for once letting me speak my truth. They didn't ask for money. They didn't beg for forgiveness. They just wanted a chance to be better. I told them this: my kids will only know people who respect their mother. We parted with no promises, just honesty. I didn't feel vindicated or victorious. I felt calm. As I stepped outside, I realized something. I wasn't walking away for approval or closure. I was walking in my own power, with no need to look back.